Do you know the real price of changing your life? It isn't the sweat, the early mornings, or the discipline. It's not the money or the time. It's the moment you realize that the people who are supposed to love you most will be the ones who fight the hardest to pull you back down. For them, your transformation isn't an inspiration, it's an accusation, and they will never, ever forgive you for it. My day started at 5 a.m. The air in the Denver mountains is different then, thin and sharp, a blade against your lungs. I ran 4 miles, the gravel crunching under my sneakers in a steady rhythm that matched my heart. This was my church, my therapy, my office. At the summit, I pulled out my phone. Thousands of people were waiting. "Hey, warriors," I said, my breath fogging in the cold. "What are we leaving behind today? Is it a doubt? A fear? An excuse?" I smiled, feeling the familiar rush. I was selling them control, a sense of power over their own lives, a power I desperately needed myself. An hour later, I was blending my green smoothie, spinach, kale, banana, almond milk, the color of life, of discipline. I sipped it while answering comments on my latest post. 10 myths about carbs you need to stop believing. I was Chloe Maxwell, a brand, an ideal. My 290,000 followers saw a woman who had conquered her body and built a business on it. They didn't see the girl I was about to become the moment I put my car in drive and headed toward the suburbs. They didn't know I was driving toward the very people I had to escape to become myself. The smell hits you a block away from my parents' house. It's a thick, sweet cloud of melting butter, caramelized sugar, and yeast. It used to be the smell of home. Now, it's the smell of dread. Their bakery, the Sweet Spot, is a local institution, famous for artery-clogging pastries and cakes that could send a diabetic into a coma from across the room. It's also my family's religion, and I am the heretic who has forsaken their God. I walked in, and the assault began. "Chloe, you're here." My mother enveloped me in a hug that felt more like an inspection, her hands running over my arms. "You're so thin, honey. Are you eating?" Behind her, my older sister Brianna smirked. "She eats, Mom. Rabbit food." They thought it was a joke, a loving jab. But have you ever heard a joke that feels like 1,000 tiny needles? That's what every family dinner felt like. It was a performance. And my role was to sit there and smile while they tried to slowly, lovingly force-feed me the person I used to be. The table was a masterpiece of nutritional warfare. A glistening pot roast swam in a gravy thick enough to pave a road. A mountain of mashed potatoes was cratered with a pool of melted butter. And in the center of it all, like a pagan idol, sat my mother's new creation, a triple-decker cheesecake with an Oreo crust and a lattice of chocolate syrup. "I made it just for you," my mom said, beaming. It was a lie, of course. She made it for them. She made it to test me, to see if I would break. I took the smallest possible piece of roast, no gravy, and a spoonful of green beans. I moved the food around my plate, listening to them talk about the bakery's struggles. "People are obsessed with this health nonsense now," Brianna complained, shoveling a huge forkful of potatoes into her mouth. "They'd rather eat a kale chip that tastes like cardboard than a real piece of cake." Her eyes flickered to me, a silent accusation. I was the enemy. I was the face of the health nonsense that was killing their legacy. Then came the moment I had been dreading all evening. My mother stood up, a massive silver knife in her hand. "Who's ready for dessert?" she chirped. Before I could even form the words, a slab of cheesecake landed on a plate in front of me. It wasn't a slice. It was an architectural marvel, a monument to everything I now stood against. "Mom, I couldn't possibly," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I'm so full. Dinner was wonderful." My mother's face fell, the light in her eyes dimming with practiced disappointment. It's a look designed to shatter your resolve. Oh. The word was small, but it filled the entire room. But I made it for you. Brianna leaned forward, her voice a syrupy weapon. Come on, Chloe. It's just one piece of cake. Don't hurt her feelings. All that work she put in. What they were really saying was, don't reject us. Don't show us that you're different, that you're better. Because in my family, refusing food isn't a dietary choice. It's a declaration of war. It's the ultimate act of betrayal. And as I looked at that slice of cake, I knew this was a battle I couldn't win. I could only choose how I was going to lose. Have you ever noticed how silence can be louder than an explosion? After I refused the cheesecake, the air in the dining room became thick and heavy, charged with unspoken accusations. The cheerful clinking of forks stopped. My father cleared his throat and started talking about the weather, a sure sign of a domestic emergency. I had won the battle of the cake, but I could feel I was about to lose something much more important. My mother began clearing the plates with a clatter that was pure performance art. Each dish slammed into the stack was a word she wouldn't say aloud. Ungrateful, disrespectful, selfish. Brianna watched her, then turned her gaze to me, her eyes narrowed. She had a look on her face I knew well. It was the look of a predator that had just spotted a weakness in the herd. She wasn't just my sister. She was my mother's enforcer. So, the bakery, Brianna began, her voice deceptively casual. Sales are down another 10% this quarter. My father sighed into his coffee cup. It's this whole health craze, he mumbled. Nobody wants real food anymore. And just like that, 3 pairs of eyes were on me, the ambassador of the health craze, the traitor sitting at their table. What if I told you that your success is the one thing your family can't stand to see? This was the opening she had been waiting for. Brianna leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table like she was about to propose a treaty. Which is why I have an idea, she said, her eyes locked on mine. A genius idea, actually. Chloe, you have, what is it now? Almost 300,000 followers? I nodded slowly, my stomach tightening. That's a lot of people, she continued, a shark smile playing on her lips. That's a lot of customers. I knew what was coming. I felt it like a drop in air pressure before a storm. This wasn't just about the bakery's finances anymore. This was about pulling me back into their world, about branding me with their values. You need to help us, Chloe. It's the family business. My mom stopped her dramatic dish stacking and stood in the doorway, drying a plate that was already bone dry, listening. This was a coordinated attack. You should do a few posts for us. Brianna laid it all out. Talk about our cakes. You could write something like, even with a healthy lifestyle, you have to treat yourself sometimes. Balance is key. She said balance with a sneer, mocking the very word that was the cornerstone of my brand. Think about it. We could even launch a new line. The Chloe-approved sweet spot. People would eat it up. The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of expectation. They stared at me, their faces radiating a grotesque hopefulness. They honestly thought this was a brilliant win-win proposition. They couldn't see the abyss they were asking me to jump into. They weren't asking for a favor. They were asking for professional suicide. They wanted me to take the years of trust I had built, the entire foundation of my career, and light it on fire for the sake of selling a few more cheesecakes. My brand wasn't just my job, it was the story of my escape. And they were asking me to write the final chapter, in which I came home and admitted it was all a mistake. Have you ever been presented with a choice that was no choice at all? A question where any answer leads to your own execution? That's how I felt, sitting at that dinner table with their 3 hopeful faces staring at me. They weren't just asking me to post a photo of a cake. They were asking me to publicly renounce my own religion and kneel before their altar of sugar and flour. The silence stretched, and in that quiet I could hear the sound of my career, my identity, crumbling. I took a deep breath, trying to choose my words with the care of a bomb disposal expert. I understand you're in a tough spot, I began, my voice softer than I wanted. And I do want to help. I really do. I saw a flicker of triumph in Brianna's eyes. She thought she'd won. But I can't do it that way. It wouldn't be authentic. The word hung in the air between us, a foreign concept in this house. My entire brand, my relationship with my audience, is built on trust. They trust me to be honest about health and nutrition. I can't tell them to treat themselves with processed sugar and trans fats, I continued, the words getting a little stronger. It would destroy everything I've spent years building. They would see right through it. I looked from my sister's hardening face to my mother's, which was beginning to cloud over with that familiar, weaponized hurt. This was my moment to pivot, to offer the bridge I had been mentally constructing. But that doesn't mean I can't help, I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. What if we did something else? What if I helped you develop a new line? A line of genuinely healthy desserts for the sweet spot. I was talking faster now, desperate to make them see the potential. We could use alternative flours, natural sweeteners, high-protein ingredients. I could create recipes, promote them to my audience as a truly healthy indulgence. We could call it Chloe's Clean Treats. It would open up a whole new market for you. For a single, beautiful second, I thought it might work. I was offering them a lifeline, not a handout. The silence that followed was colder than the one before. It was a polar vortex of rejection. My mother was the first to speak, her voice dripping with ice. Ruin our recipes? You want to ruin my grandmother's recipes with your grass and twigs? She looked at me as if I'd suggested burning the bakery to the ground. Our food is about comfort. It's about love. It's not supposed to be clean. She spat the word out like it was a profanity. Brianna let out a short, bitter laugh. We don't need your clean treats, Chloe. We need your followers. We need your influence. There it was. The truth, stripped bare of all pretense. They didn't want my expertise, my creativity, or my actual help. They wanted to use me. They wanted to slap my face onto their failing business model like a cheap sticker. They saw my success not as something I had built, but as a natural resource they were entitled to exploit. My father, who had been silent the whole time, finally stirred. Now, Chloe, your mother has a point. We have a tradition to uphold. My compromise wasn't just rejected, it was treated as an insult. The air was thick with their unified resentment. My mother turned her back on me and started clearing the rest of the table. Fine, she said, her voice tight with unshed tears. Don't help us. I see how it is. You're too good for us now. It was then that I truly understood. This was never a negotiation. It was a loyalty test, and I had just failed. Do you know what happens after a battle? The silence. But it's not a peaceful silence. It's the humming of live wires, the feeling of something terrible coiled and waiting in the dark. After my soft no, the direct confrontation stopped. The war didn't end, though. It just went underground, morphing into a guerrilla campaign fought with smiles, feigned concern, and strategically deployed memories. The open warfare was almost preferable. At least then, you knew where the bullets were coming from. The weekly dinners became exercises in psychological torture. They never mentioned my refusal to help the bakery again. Instead, they talked around me, about me, as if I were a difficult piece of furniture. She's just so intense now, Brianna would say to my father, loud enough for me to hear from 2 feet away. Always so serious. Remember how she used to laugh? A real, deep belly laugh. My mother would nod, sighing dramatically. That was before the obsession, before she started thinking food was the enemy. They were creating a narrative, and in it, I was the villain. I wasn't healthy. I was obsessed. I wasn't disciplined. I was angry. I wasn't happy. I was joyless. They mourned a version of me that no longer existed. The pliable, overweight girl who never said no, who ate their food and their praise with equal, desperate hunger. Every compliment about my success was backhanded. "We saw you on that local news segment. You looked very professional. A little tired, maybe. A bit gaunt in the face." It was a slow, steady erosion of my reality, designed to make me doubt the very happiness I had fought so hard to achieve. The campaign escalated one Tuesday afternoon. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was a tag on Facebook, from my mother. "Have you ever had a memory weaponized against you?" I clicked on it, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a photo of me from about 8 years ago, at Brianna's birthday. I was at least 50 pounds heavier, wearing a tight dress and holding a half-eaten slice of cake with frosting smeared on my cheek. The caption read, "Throwback to simpler times. Remember our happy, fun-loving Chloe before she got so serious about the gym? I miss this girl." Hundreds of her friends, our relatives, people I'd known my whole life, had liked it. The comments were a string of poison-laced bonbons. "Yes, I remember she was always the life of the party. She looks so much healthier with some meat on her bones." It was a public shaming disguised as a fond memory. She had taken a snapshot of my past, a moment of my deepest insecurity, and held it up for the world to see. She was telling everyone, and me, that this new version of me was a downgrade. The real Chloe, the good Chloe, was the fat, compliant girl in the photo. Then the packages started arriving. Once a week, a crisp white box from the sweet spot would appear on my doorstep. The first time, I thought it was a peace offering. I opened it to find a dozen of their signature cinnamon rolls, glistening with a thick cream cheese frosting. The smell filled my small, clean apartment, an unwelcome ghost of my past. I couldn't eat them. I couldn't give them away without a lengthy explanation. So I did the only thing I could. I threw the entire box, all 12 of them, into the dumpster behind my building, feeling like a criminal. The next week, it was a chocolate fudge cake. The week after, a lemon meringue pie. It was a relentless assault, a physical reminder that they would never accept the new me. They weren't sending me food. They were sending me a message. "We know who you really are, and we will keep sending her to your door until you let her back in." How much poison can you swallow before you realize it's not medicine? For weeks, I had been choking down my family's love, letting their passive aggression seep into my bloodstream. It left me feeling weak, isolated, and worst of all, crazy. I started to wonder if they were right. Was I the angry one? The obsessed one? Gaslighting is a funny thing. The people holding the match are the first to tell you that you're imagining the fire. I was at the gym, my sanctuary, a place where effort equaled results. A simple, clean equation unlike the twisted algebra of my family. I was pushing through a final set of squats, the burn in my thighs a welcome, honest pain. That's when Mark walked over. He's the lead trainer on my team, a quiet, observant man with a stillness that makes people feel seen. He didn't say anything, just handed me a water bottle. "You're going to burn a hole in the floor with that glare," he said, his voice a low rumble. I tried to force a smile, but it felt like cracking plaster. "Just family stuff," I mumbled. It was a pathetic understatement. He nodded, leaning against the weight rack. "The kind of stuff that gets delivered in a white pastry box?" My head snapped up. He'd seen them. He'd seen the weekly deliveries from the sweet spot that I tried to discreetly shuttle from my porch to the dumpster. My carefully constructed wall of professional composure began to crumble. And so I told him. I told him everything. The disastrous dinner, the business proposal, the relentless deliveries of my former favorite foods. I pulled out my phone and, my hands trembling slightly, showed him the Facebook photo. The smiling, overweight girl who stared back at me felt like a stranger, a ghost they kept trying to resurrect. I felt my voice crack as I spoke. They say they miss me, that happy girl. But she wasn't happy, Mark. She was miserable, and they know it. He listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finished, a wave of shame washed over me. I sounded like a child complaining about her parents. But Mark didn't offer pity. He offered something far more valuable: clarity. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, "and I don't want you to think it's an exaggeration. This is not about love. This is about war." I must have looked confused, because he pressed on, his voice firm. "You think this is about your weight, about cake. It's not. They aren't jealous of your body, Chloe. They're jealous of your control." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Control. He was right. In your family's world, he explained, food is the currency of control. It's how they express love, demand loyalty, and punish dissent. You didn't just lose weight, you defected. You left their system, created your own, and proved you could thrive without them. Your discipline isn't an inspiration to them, it's a daily accusation against their own lack of it. Every time you refuse a piece of cake, you are holding up a mirror they don't want to look into. It was a revelation, a key turning in a rusty lock in my mind. The old photos, the concerned comments, the boxes of sweets, they weren't attempts to connect. They were attempts to destabilize me, to make me doubt myself, to pull me back into a system where they held all the power. "They don't want to help the family business," Mark said, his voice dropping. "They want to own you again." And in that moment, the hurt I'd been feeling for weeks began to harden, crystallizing into something new, something solid. It was resolve. I wasn't crazy. I was at war. And I had just been handed the battle plan. What's the most dangerous lie in the world? It's the one you desperately want to believe. It's the whisper in your ear that says, maybe this time, it's different. Maybe this time, they've changed. It's the lie that a predator tells you right before it strikes, and the one you tell yourself as you willingly walk into the trap, because the hope for peace feels better than the certainty of war. The Denver Marathon was in less than 24 hours. For months, this single event had been the focal point of my content, my training, and my life. It was more than a race. It was a public promise, a 26.2-mile pilgrimage I was taking my entire community on. I had shared my meal preps, my training runs, my moments of doubt, and my breakthroughs. Thousands of people were watching, not just to see if I could do it, but to find their own motivation in my journey. The pressure was immense, but it was the kind I thrived on. It was clean, measurable pressure. I spent the evening in a state of quiet ritual. I laid out my gear: the lightweight running shoes, the branded tank top, the number bib. 3271. I hydrated methodically, sipping an electrolyte drink while stretching my muscles on a foam roller. My apartment was calm, a temple of preparation. I was in my element, in complete control. Then the doorbell rang. My heart gave a little jolt of irritation. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole and a knot of pure ice formed in my stomach. It was Brianna. She stood on my doorstep holding a huge ceramic casserole dish, a ridiculously bright smile plastered on her face. "Surprise!" she chirped as I opened the door. The smile didn't reach her eyes. Mark's voice echoed in my head. This is not about love. This is about war. But her performance was flawless. She looked like the perfect concerned sister. I know you're getting ready for your big day, so I won't stay long. I wanted to bring you something. She pushed past me into my kitchen and set the heavy dish on the counter, peeling back the aluminum foil. A cloud of steam erupted, carrying a scent so thick with memory it almost made me dizzy. Lasagna, my childhood favorite. Layers of pasta, rich meat sauce, and a blanket of browned, bubbling mozzarella and ricotta cheese. It was a heart attack on a plate. It was everything I had run from. I know we've been weird lately, she said, not looking at me. But I wanted to do this. For you. You need to carb load before a big race, right? I made your favorite to support you. You need your strength. I stared at the dish. Every instinct, every nerve ending in my body was screaming, danger. This was a Trojan horse. A perfectly constructed, cheese-covered weapon. But how do you say that? How do you look your smiling sister in the eye and say, I don't trust you, and I don't trust your food? The ensuing fight would be ugly, draining me of the precise mental energy I needed for the next day. A fight was the last thing I wanted. So, I made a calculated decision. I chose what I thought was the lesser of two evils. Wow, Brianna, I said, forcing a warmth into my voice that felt like swallowing glass. You really didn't have to do this. Thank you. Her smile became genuine for the first time. It was the smile of victory. Of course I did. Now let me get you a plate. You have to eat. I held up my hand. Just a small piece. I've already eaten, but I have to try it. She cut a square from the corner, a little bigger than I would have liked, and slid it onto one of my clean white plates. It looked obscene in my minimalist kitchen. I picked up a fork, took a small bite, and let the rich, fatty, familiar taste flood my mouth. It tasted like home. It tasted like a trap. It's delicious. I lied. And in that moment, I prayed I was just being paranoid. Have you ever truly understood the difference between paranoia and intuition? Paranoia is a ghost you create in your own mind. Intuition is the quiet, insistent whisper that tries to warn you about the ghosts in other people. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I told myself the unease I felt was just paranoia, a side effect of my war with my family. I never should have ignored that whisper. It started at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was ripped from sleep by a sharp, coiling knot deep in my gut. It wasn't the dull ache of a strained muscle. It was a vicious, twisting cramp that made me gasp in the dark. My first thought was nerves. Pre-race jitters. My mind, ever the disciplined coach, tried to rationalize it. Breathe through it, Chloe. It's just anxiety. But another wave hit, sharper this time, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. This wasn't in my head. This was in my body. Within half an hour, the battle was lost. My calm, controlled body had become a war zone. I was doubled over, making desperate trips to the bathroom, my stomach churning in a violent storm that left me weak and trembling. The carefully calibrated fuel I had spent days consuming was being violently rejected. I knelt on the cold tiles of the bathroom floor, my cheek pressed against the porcelain of the tub, shaking with a sick, powerless feeling I hadn't experienced in years. The world had shrunk to this small white room and the agony inside me. And then, in the miserable quiet between spasms, the whisper of intuition returned, screaming. It came as a flash of memory. Brianna's face on my doorstep. Her smile, too bright. Her words, I made your favorite to support you. The lasagna. The single small piece I had eaten to keep the peace. It wasn't just rich. It wasn't just a deviation from my diet. What if it was more? What if she'd added something? A load of extra butter or oil, or a laxative ingredient disguised by the spices? Something she knew my clean, finely tuned system couldn't possibly handle. The thought was so monstrous, so vile, that my mind recoiled from it. But my body, in its violent agony, knew the truth. This wasn't an accident. This was sabotage. I lay on that floor as the first pale light of dawn crept through the window. 5 a.m. My alarm went off in the bedroom, a cheerful, chirping sound that felt like a mockery. I should have been getting up, pulling on my gear, feeling the electric hum of anticipation. Instead, I was hollowed out, drained, and filled with a cold, clear rage that burned hotter than my fever. She had done it. My own sister. She hadn't just brought me a dish. She had delivered a perfectly targeted biological weapon designed to achieve one thing: to make me fail. The hardest part wasn't the pain. It was picking up my phone an hour later, my hands still shaking. My race bib, number 3271, lay on my dresser like a tombstone. I opened my social media, my finger hovering over the screen. Thousands of people were waiting for my pre-race update. Instead, I typed the most humiliating words of my professional life. I am so sorry to announce that I've come down with a sudden and severe stomach bug and will not be able to run the marathon today. The likes, the sad emojis, the messages of support poured in. But all I felt was the icy sting of my sister's victory. She hadn't just made me sick. She had made me a liar and a failure in front of the entire world. There's a specific kind of fuel that burns hotter than any carbohydrate or protein. It's rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. By midday, the physical sickness had subsided, leaving behind a hollowed-out weakness. But in its place, this new energy surged through me. It was the clarity that comes after a betrayal so profound it scorches the earth of every other emotion. The hurt was gone. The confusion was gone. All that remained was a single, cold purpose. I wasn't just going to confront my sister. I was going to detonate the truth in the middle of her sugar-coated kingdom. I didn't bother changing out of my sweatpants and worn-out t-shirt. I didn't shower. I wanted her to see what she had done to me. I drove to the sweet spot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The familiar bell above the door chimed as I walked in, a grotesquely cheerful sound. The air was thick with the cloying smell of buttercream and hypocrisy. Brianna was behind the counter, arranging cupcakes on a tiered stand, humming along to some pop song on the radio. She looked up, and for a split second, her humming faltered. She saw my face. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a little too high, a little too bright. "I saw your post. I was just about to call you. I feel awful. You poor thing. It must have been that 24-hour bug that's going around." Her performance was breathtaking, the concerned sister dripping with fake sympathy. Did she really think I was that stupid? Did she think I would believe her? It was the final, most profound insult. "Cut the crap, Brianna," I said, my voice low and shaking with a fury I could barely contain. The one other customer in the shop, a woman eyeing a tray of eclairs, looked up, startled. I didn't care. "The 24-hour bug? Is that what you're calling your special lasagna recipe now?" Brianna's face went pale. The cupcake she was holding slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the pristine glass of the display case, leaving a smear of pink frosting. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her eyes darting toward the back room. "You were fine when I left." "No," I said, taking a step closer, my voice rising. "I was fine until you left. Until I ate that poison you brought me, pretending it was an act of love. You did this. You sabotaged me. On purpose." The customer quietly put down her pastry tongs and scurried out the door. We were alone now, surrounded by the saccharine evidence of her life's work. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The denial was crumbling, the facade cracking under the pressure of my direct accusation. "That's a horrible thing to say," she finally managed, trying to sound indignant. But there were no tears, no genuine hurt in her eyes. There was only the cold, hard glint of being caught. I pushed past the breaking point. "Was it the butter, Brianna? Or did you go the extra mile? Did you look up what ingredients would give a long-distance runner the worst possible stomach cramps?" And that's when she broke. The cornered animal finally lunged. "So what if I did?" she screamed, her voice raw and ugly, all the sweetness gone. "What did you expect? For me to just stand here and watch you become this perfect skinny saint while you look down on us? You float into our house once a week, judging every single thing we put in our mouths. You post your perfect little life online for the whole world to see, which just makes us look like fat, lazy failures." The words poured out of her, a torrent of jealousy and resentment that had clearly been building for years. Her chest was heaving, her face splotchy and red. "You think you're so much better than us now, with your green juice and your marathons. I just wanted you to feel weak for one day. I wanted you to know what it feels like to not be in control for once in your perfect, miserable life. I wanted you to fail." There it was, the confession, wrapped in a tirade of blame. It wasn't about concern or business or even love. It was about envy. A corrosive, ugly envy that had festered in the dark until it had driven my own sister to poison me. The truth was finally out, and it was more rotten than I could have ever imagined. What's the most terrifying sound in the world? It's the silence that follows a confession of pure hatred. Brianna's ugly words hung in the air between us, shimmering in the bakery's artificial light. The rage that had propelled me here had burned out, leaving behind the cold, heavy ash of truth. She hadn't just sabotaged my race. She had wanted to. She had enjoyed it. For years, I thought I was fighting for my health and my career. What if I told you I was really just fighting against this? This raw, festering jealousy that wore the mask of a sister's love. The bell on the front door was still echoing from the customer who fled when another sound cut through the tension. The squeak of the kitchen door behind the counter. My mother stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was a carefully arranged mask of maternal concern, but her eyes were sharp, analytical, taking in the scene like a general assessing a battlefield. She saw my tear-streaked, pale face. She saw Brianna's defiant, blotchy one. She saw the smeared cupcake on the glass. "What in God's name is going on in here?" my mother asked, her voice dangerously calm. I could hear the shouting all the way in the back. Brianna immediately crumpled, turning to our mother like a child running to a parent after a playground fight. "She's saying the most awful things, Mom. She's accusing me of poisoning her." The performance was masterful. The victim card, played with the skill of a professional gambler. I stood my ground, my voice flat and empty. "She admitted it. Ask her. She admitted she put something in the lasagna to make me sick." My mother's gaze shifted from me to Brianna, her expression unreadable. I held my breath, a stupid, flickering ember of hope igniting in my chest. This was it. The moment of reckoning. My mother, the matriarch, would finally see the truth. She would dispense justice. But what do you do when the judge is the one who created the crime? My mother walked around the counter, not to comfort me, but to stand directly between us, creating a physical barrier. She placed a hand on Brianna's arm. "Now, let's all just take a breath," she said in a soothing voice that set my teeth on edge. "Chloe, nobody poisoned you. That's a hysterical thing to say. Brianna, whatever you did, I'm sure you didn't mean any real harm." She was already rewriting the narrative, softening the edges of the ugly truth, painting it over with a thick coat of denial. She told me she wanted me to fail. I insisted, my voice rising again. She said she was glad I was sick. My mother turned to me and her face hardened. Well, maybe you should think about why she feels that way, she said, her voice turning sharp. This whole new life of yours, it's been very hard on the family. You make your sister feel bad about herself. You make me feel bad. You've both said and done things you shouldn't have. You are both at fault. And there it was. In that single, breathtaking moment of moral evasion, I finally saw it all with perfect, horrifying clarity. This wasn't a family. It was a cult. And my mother was its leader. Brianna wasn't the enemy. She was just a loyal soldier, carrying out the will of the system, a system designed to punish anyone who tried to leave. A strange calm washed over me. The last ember of hope died, and in its place was the cold, clean certainty of a surgeon about to make a necessary amputation. I looked at my mother, the architect of my misery, and my sister, the willing instrument, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty distance. I'm done, I said, my voice so quiet they both leaned in to hear me. This is over. I will not be coming to family dinners. I will not be a part of this toxic, broken system anymore. I took a step back toward the door. You can contact me when you are both ready to sit down with me and my therapist. Until then, we have nothing to talk about. I turned my back on them, on the cloying smell of sugar and lies, and walked out of the sweet spot for the last time. The little bell chimed my exit, and for the first time in my life, it sounded like freedom. Have you ever made a decision so clean, so necessary, that it felt like taking your first breath of pure, untainted air? That's what walking out of the bakery felt like. For 3 days, that feeling held. I blocked their numbers. I didn't check their social media. I lived in a bubble of blessed, fragile silence. But if you cut a toxic root from your life, you can't just walk away. You have to stand back and watch out for the poison that will inevitably seep up from the ground where you made the cut. It happened on a Wednesday morning. I was on my yoga mat, trying to find a center that had been shattered, when my phone started buzzing relentlessly on the floor beside me. It wasn't a call. It was a flood of direct messages on Instagram. Dozens of them, all in a few minutes, from followers, friends, even from Mark. The first one I opened was from a longtime follower named Jessica. Chloe, I am so sorry. Please don't look at it. Just know we have your back. My heart turned to a block of ice. Don't look at what? Against every instinct for self-preservation, I looked. Someone had sent me a link to a new Instagram profile. The handle was Chloe Maxwell Unfiltered. The profile picture was the one my mother had posted on Facebook. Me, 50 pounds heavier, face smeared with frosting, caught in a moment of forced, oblivious joy. The bio read, "She sold you a story of empowerment. Her family is here to tell you the truth." And as I scrolled, my world tilted on its axis. This wasn't just an attack. This was a meticulously crafted character assassination. The first post was that same birthday picture, but the caption was different. It was darker, more insidious. The picture she hates, the moment right before she ran to the bathroom to cry about the calories. The happy girl was a myth. The obsession was already in control. It was a lie. A complete venomous fabrication designed to reframe my past as a prelude to a mental illness. I felt the air leave my lungs. They were stealing my history and repainting it in the colors of their own resentment. I kept scrolling, a spectator at my own public execution. They had found other old photos, pictures I hadn't seen in a decade. Me looking tired at a family barbecue with a caption, "Exhausted from starving herself all day just to pretend to eat a burger bun." A picture of me in a baggy sweatshirt captioned, "Hiding the weight loss that was happening way too fast." We were all so worried. They were building a narrative, brick by ugly brick, that I wasn't an inspiration, but a sick, dishonest fraud. Then came the text posts, paragraphs of pure fiction presented as heartfelt, worried confessions. We know she won't admit it, but we have to speak up. The constant talk of clean eating is a cover for her orthorexia. We saw her obsession with the scale. We know she sometimes went days eating nothing but celery. The comments were a firestorm. Some followers defended me fiercely, but others were latching on, their own doubts now validated. I always thought she was a bit too thin. This explains so much. The poison was working. The final post was the one that made me drop my phone. It was a blurry photo of a bathroom trash can with a box of what looked like diet pills visible. We found this in her trash years ago. She'll deny it, but her journey wasn't as natural as she claims. It was a lie so audacious, so completely divorced from reality, that I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a public declaration of war. They hadn't just been content to get rid of me, they were trying to burn my entire world to the ground. What do you do when the people who gave you life decide to publicly destroy it? You can't fight back, because that would mean wrestling with pigs in the mud. You can't reason with them, because their motive isn't understanding. It's destruction. For the first hour after I discovered the account, I felt like I was being flayed alive in a public square. My skin peeled back one photo, one lie at a time. My phone was a grenade in my hand, constantly exploding with new notifications, new comments, new people choosing a side in a war they didn't understand. Mark was at my apartment within 20 minutes. His face, a grim mask. He scrolled through the feed, his jaw tightening with each post. His professional advice, the advice of my entire team when they called in for an emergency conference call, was unanimous and logical. Ignore it. Say nothing. It's a fire that will burn itself out if you don't give it any oxygen. Any response, any denial, will only make it bigger. We'll have our lawyers send a cease and desist, and we'll report the account until it's taken down. It was the smart public relations move. It was the safe move. It was also, I knew with every fiber of my being, the wrong one. How do you ignore your own life story being twisted into a weapon against you? How do you stay silent while a digital effigy of you is being burned in front of hundreds of thousands of people? Ignoring it felt like an admission of guilt. It felt like letting them win. It felt like letting that scared, overweight girl they were so obsessed with be my final legacy. For a few hours, I considered fighting back. I drafted angry posts in my mind, refuting their lies one by one, exposing my sister's sabotage. But I stopped. I realized that responding with anger was still playing their game, on their field. It would just be a messy, public screaming match that would leave everyone, especially me, covered in filth. There are two ways to respond to an attack like this. You can hide, or you can fight. But as I sat on my floor, the hum of my phone a constant reminder of the chaos, I realized there was a third option. You don't have to fight fire with fire. You can fight it with water. You can meet their lies not with denials, but with a truth so raw and overwhelming it extinguishes the flames. I wasn't going to defend myself against their story. I was going to tell my own. All of it. For the first time. I didn't set up my professional camera or my ring light. I didn't write a script. I took my phone, propped it up on a stack of books on my coffee table, and hit record. I was still in my yoga clothes, my face puffy from crying, the raw evidence of my pain visible to anyone who looked. I didn't start with anger. I started with a quiet, terrifying vulnerability. You may have seen an account that was recently created by people from my past. I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. It has a lot of old photos of me, and I want to tell you, that girl in the pictures, the one who looks so unhappy, that was me. And they're right about one thing. She wasn't happy. I didn't name them. I didn't mention the lasagna or the bakery or the arguments. I refused to make them the main characters in my story. Instead, I talked about what it felt like to grow up in a home where food was a language, and the only words it knew how to say were control, guilt, and obligation. I talked about the girl in the photos, how she ate to please people, how she hid her sadness under layers of fat and forced smiles. I confessed my own unhealthy relationship with food, not as an eating disorder, but as a symptom of a disordered environment. Then I talked about change. I talked about how hard it is to decide to save your own life. I talked about the painful, lonely work of unlearning a lifetime of bad habits. And then I looked directly into the camera, my eyes welling up with tears I refused to let fall. The hardest part of changing, I said, is that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most will fight the hardest to keep you the same. Your growth feels like a rejection of them. Your new boundaries feel like an attack. They will try to convince you and the world that the old, broken you was the real you. I took a deep breath. This is not just my story. This is the story of anyone who has ever had to set a boundary to save themselves. And to you, I say, your journey is valid. Your strength is real. And you do not need anyone's permission to become who you were meant to be. I ended the recording. I uploaded the unedited 20-minute video directly to my feed, and then I turned off my phone. I had no idea what would happen next. I had just walked into the fire, and now all I could do was wait to see if I would be consumed by it. Do you know the difference between a surrender and a release? One is an admission of defeat. The other is an act of faith. When I turned off my phone, I didn't know which one it was. For 12 hours, I lived in absolute silence. No television, no music, no outside world. I just existed in the quiet of my apartment, feeling the phantom vibration of a phone that was turned off. I had either just committed professional suicide, or I had performed the most honest act of my life. There was no in-between. I didn't turn it back on until Mark knocked on my door late that night, holding 2 containers of takeout soup. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just looked at me, then at my dead phone on the counter. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, but I guess it doesn't matter." He simply nodded and pulled out his own phone. "Then let me show you what you did." He opened my Instagram page. The screen lit up, and it was like looking at the sun. The video had over 1 million views. The number was still climbing, fast, but it wasn't the view count that made me gasp. It was the comments. There were tens of thousands of them. It wasn't just support. It was a global outpouring of shared experience. "My family uses guilt trips about my weight every holiday. Thank you for putting into words what I've been feeling for years. I showed this to my husband and he finally understood. I'm a therapist and I'm sending this to my clients who struggle with boundaries. You are not alone." Over and over, that same phrase, "You are not alone." They hadn't just watched my story. They had seen their own. My confession had become a permission slip for thousands of other people to feel validated in their own quiet wars. Mark swiped over to the hate account. Chloe Maxwell, unfiltered. The page was gone. A simple, beautiful, "Sorry, this page isn't available" message was in its place. "What happened?" I whispered. "Your followers happened," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. The account was drowned, buried under a tidal wave of complaints and reports for harassment. It was gone in less than 3 hours. Their attack hadn't just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. In their attempt to expose me as a fraud, they had revealed me as something far more powerful. I was human. I was relatable. I checked my own follower count. It had jumped by 50,000. But these weren't just numbers. Reading the comments, I could feel the quality of this new community. It was forged in a fire of shared vulnerability. They weren't just fans of a fitness influencer anymore. They were allies. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel a petty sense of victory. As I looked at the screen, at the tidal wave of support, I felt a profound and quiet sense of validation that was so deep, it ached. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, after a lifetime of being misrepresented. The truth hadn't just set me free, it had created an army. My family had tried to burn me down, but they had forgotten one crucial thing about fire. Sometimes, it doesn't destroy. Sometimes, it forges. They say time heals all wounds. What a beautiful, dangerous lie. Time doesn't heal. It just gives you space. Space to build scar tissue over the raw parts of yourself, to learn to walk without limping, to forget the precise shape of the knife that was twisted in your back. 6 months had passed since my life had been set on fire. It felt like a lifetime ago, and it felt like yesterday. I hadn't burned down. The fire had forged me into something new, something stronger. My new course, Healthy Boundaries, had become a phenomenon. It wasn't about nutrition or exercise. It was about the soul. It was about learning to say no to the people you love. It was about giving yourself permission to save your own life, even if it meant disappointing others. I had taken the ugliest, most painful experience of my life and turned it into a curriculum for survival. I was helping thousands of people, and in doing so, I was healing myself every single day. I hadn't spoken a word to my family. The silence was no longer heavy or charged. It was just a fact, like the sky or the mountains. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a utility bill and a magazine. It was a plain, white envelope, and my name and address were written in a familiar, slightly sloppy cursive. Brianna. For a moment, my heart did a frantic, ugly little dance against my ribs. A ghost from the past had figured out how to use a stamp. I carried it inside and set it on the counter, staring at it as if it might explode. My first instinct was to throw it away, to not even let her words into my clean, quiet space. But I didn't. Curiosity, or maybe the need for a final, definitive period at the end of the sentence, won out. I opened it. The letter was short, written on a single piece of lined paper torn from a spiral notebook. It was just as awkward and clumsy as I had imagined it would be. There was no, "I'm sorry." There was no, "I was wrong." The words of true accountability were nowhere to be found. Instead, it was a stilted, rambling paragraph about how things at the bakery had been slow, how she had been bored one afternoon. And then, the sentence that made me sit down. "I saw that recipe for the zucchini walnut muffins on your website. I made them. And they weren't as bad as I thought they would be." That was it. That was the whole letter. No apology. No plea for reconciliation. Just a grudging admission that one of my healthy recipes didn't taste like cardboard. I read it 3 times, trying to decipher the intent. Was it a test? An attempt to see if I would crack? See this as an olive branch? And come running back? The old Chloe would have. She would have clung to that one pathetic sentence as a sign of hope. But the old Chloe was gone. I looked at the letter not as a daughter or a sister, but as an observer, and I saw it for what it was. It wasn't a sign of reconciliation. It wasn't for me at all. Not really. It was for her. It was the first, tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the foundation of her own reality. A single zucchini muffin that didn't taste like a punishment. It was a flicker of a possibility that her world and my world didn't have to be at war. It meant nothing for our future, but it meant something for hers. It was a tiny seed of change, planted in the most stubborn, resistant soil imaginable. Maybe it would grow, maybe it would die. It was no longer my responsibility to tend her garden. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer with other documents I rarely looked at. It was a piece of my past, but it no longer had any power over my present. I changed into my running clothes, laced up my sneakers, and headed out the door. The Denver air was crisp and clean, and as my feet hit the familiar trail, I felt the steady, powerful rhythm of my own body. For so many years, I had run carrying a weight that had nothing to do with gravity. But today, as I rounded a bend and saw the mountains sharp against the blue sky, I realized it was gone. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was just running, feeling not the crushing weight of expectations, but the breathtaking lightness of freedom.